do understand that someone critiquing or calling something that you made a fundamental part of your identity transphobic or bigoted does feel like an assault on you as a person. But just hear me out. I promise I'm not going to say that anyone who is a fan of this movie is an irredeemable monster, or that if you enjoyed it that means you are now a transphobic bigot on the level of Milo Yiannopoulos. You remember that fucking crap? Can't believe I'm mentioning Milo Yiannopoulos in the year 2023. Wild. Just give me a chance, you know? Anyway, we've quibbled enough, and now it's time to actually get into the movie, and those trans-ish scenes themselves. Now, I'm not going to be talking about the whole entire film for obvious reasons, but to give you the brief summary up to our point that we need you and me to get to, Ace Ventura is a much-mocked private detective, specialising in animal-related crimes, who is investigating the kidnapping of a dolphin from the Miami Dolphins prior to the Superb Owl, which then leads on to a conspiracy-filled run of comedy into the team and into a variety of various affiliates, and also the human death of Roger Podacta, the head of operations for the Miami Dolphins, who fell off of a balcony. While at the same time, Ace Ventura deals with the pain in the ass that is Lieutenant Einhorn of the Miami Police, a dastardly lady who attempts to get him to drop the case while also kissing and making moves on him. This all comes to a head when Ace Ventura is hunting down Ray Finkel, a disgraced member of the Miami Dolphins at a mental asylum, and Ace Ventura discovers some elements in Finkel's possessions that make it somewhat clear that Finkel took on the persona of the missing hiker Lois Einhorn and became a woman to go undercover and ruin the Miami Dolphins and those who disgraced them and replaced them back in the day. And it's upon that discovery from Ace Ventura about Einhorn that we really hit the crux of our discussion in this movie about trans representation and the reactions of cis people to the idea of transness or trans adjacentness. Now, to drag us back a few scenes from this revelation, because guess what? I had to watch the whole fucking movie. There is something that happens earlier on that passes by as a mere comment, but upon review suddenly stands out a whole lot more. And it's during the scene where Einhorn is pashing with Ace Ventura, and he makes this comment about her gun.
Your gun is digging into my hip.
What's wrong, Ace? Want me to read you your rights?
Maybe later.
Now, with time, it becomes very clear that this comedic reference to her gun is actually about a penis. Which does make me think, for some reason, of all those conservative memes where they talk about how the only bulge they want in their woman's pants is a gun. And, you know, let's just attempt to ignore the complete lack of firearm safety that such a thing represents. A penis is less deadly. I would prefer to discover someone has one of those than a lethal weapon shoved down the pants when it should be in a holster, but that's just me. Also, I'm saying that the gun should be in a holster, not the penis. I can't imagine what a penis holster looks like. Although I imagine editing me can probably find a picture of one. What we see here is the seeds being sown for us to get that this was going to be a reveal. For us to look back on it and say, oh, aho, they planned for this all along. If you paid attention, it was obvious that such a trans reveal was going to happen. But the more fascinating part in this scene to me is how the music and how Ace Ventura plays into this. Which is that, I mean, it's designed to look like a hot woman cop, femme fatale, making out with Ace Ventura. So that's kind of desirable, and the jazz would suggest, and his clear and apparent interest in her would suggest, that this is all cool and good. You know, this is a sexy scene.
Bony little bitch, Melissa Robinson.
No, you just don't do anything for me.
Down, boy!
And then we get our contrast to that in this revelation scene a mere 10 or so minutes later, when Ace Ventura suddenly realizes that Einhorn, this hot, attractive woman, was actually a man dressed up as a woman living as a woman, with surgeries to look like a woman, who identifies as a woman and sleeps with or hits on guys like a woman. Also, I want to take a brief moment to just talk about how insane it is that Ace Ventura reaches this conclusion at all. Like, he just sort of clicks on it and has his big revelation dancing around celebrating scene where he's like, oh, I've worked it out. But there isn't, like, records of a surgery or anything like that. He just looks at the Finkel photo before standing up and shouting, Finkel is Einhorn, Einhorn is Finkel, Einhorn is a man.
That's it. Einhorn is Finkel. Finkel is Einhorn. Einhorn is a man!
And it's that moment there, upon the mention of that fact out loud, that the whole movie sees the open portal to the land of transphobia, where the Steven Crowders and Ron DeSantis' roam free, and dives right into it by having Ace Ventura rush to the toilet and begin violently retching to a musical accompaniment. He brushes his teeth and eats the toothpaste, as well as toilet plungering his face, burning all his clothes and sitting naked in the shower crying. You might be thinking to yourself right now, wait, hang on, I've seen this before. I've clicked this almost exact turn of events happening. And yes, another straight guy has been in a not exactly the same situation, but close enough, in Family Guy, with Brian having sex with a trans woman without knowing about it, and then having almost the exact same response. It's also kind of a little similar to the crying game, but nobody knows what that is, so we won't bother talking about that right now. It's like a classic transphobic reference. The idea that having made out with or had sexual feelings for or been interested in a trans woman is so disgusting, so gross and vile, that you have to purge your body and life of anything that they have touched and wash yourself at the idea of that touch or thought. We will get into it further when we're done talking about the movie, because trust me, this just gets worse. This is merely the tip of the transphobic iceberg. That's right, the shittiest moment in the Family Guy episode, the one that I decried as one of the worst episodes of trans TV in media history, which might or might not have been true, but it was certainly a good title. That's merely the entree in the rotten meal of Ace Ventura's Act 3. So, it's not good. And so, downing gum like it will stop him from feeling gay, Ace watches Einhorn's house, and then tails her, making a comment about that gun digging into the hip thing from earlier, while dry retching a little bit. And Ace watches as Einhorn talks to the captured quarterback, Dan, and then makes out with him to that saxophone coming back in from earlier.
Would you like some refreshments, Dan? I'll be right back, Dan.
Serious question here, why is she making out with so many darn people? Except for, I guess, in a classical movie sense, establishing herself as a femme fatale, and more specifically in this sense, Ace Ventura's sense that is, for us the audience to have a little giggle at these guys getting forcibly kissed by a guy pretending to be a girl. Oh, they sure knew how to do comedy back in the day before cancel culture came along, that's for sure. Unfortunately, as Ace is freeing Dan after dealing with the goons, Einhorn appears holding a gun, and then makes a comment about there being too many men on the field, because have you got it yet? Have you clocked the joke and the bit that they're gonna beat you to death with? Have you clocked Einhorn yet? Have you got it? Einhorn then calls in the cops, as she sees the opportunity to frame Ace for the whole kidnapping and murder stuff, seeing as she is a lieutenant who can do whatever she wants apparently.
Aguado, is Lieutenant Einhorn Send some men over to the Hollandale Yacht Basin on Victoria Road. I've got the kidnapper trapped in the warehouse. It's Ace Ventura, pet detective.
Oh, and the joke makes an appearance again as Ace mentions how he knows what it's like to be under pressure, as he's kissed a man. Honestly, just get to the reveal already. I can't take much more of these sly jabs about her being secretly really a man. It's killing me. Oh, wait, no, it's just another joke about how Ace is getting his ass kicked by Einhorn because she is really a guy. God, they just milked the shit out of this one.
Having a little trouble with the lady, Ace? You don't understand. She's
Finally though, as all the police are around and preparing to shoot Ace Ventura, Ace's real love interest is holding a different cop who is on their side, I think, hostage. We get to the big scene, where Ace drops his entire conclusion on the case, points the finger at Lois Einhorn, and reveals that she is Ray Finkel, and is actually a man. And then he moves to his grand plan, because at this point it is a rather unbelievable situation, and he clearly, quite possibly, made a few leaps in logic that nobody else is following. Seriously, it's entirely plausible that, like, Ray Finkel befriended a woman who helped him and pretended to be Lois Einhorn while he worked on it from the shadows. Or maybe Lois Einhorn is just a trans woman who happens to be working with Ray Finkel. He really jumped the gun, is what I'm saying here, and it's lucky that it works out to be true. Nothing we've seen at all confirms that Ace Ventura is right here. But he decides that the obvious choice is to grab her hair and pull off her wig, because why would a real woman wear a wig? Don't answer that question. And that doesn't even work, because it turns out that Lois Einhorn has real hair. It's just her hair. Like she grew it. Then he rips off her shirt to reveal her fake breasts that she is wearing, because why would any real woman wear fake breasts? Don't answer that question. Stop answering the question. You know that Ace Ventura doesn't want you to answer that question, okay? But he finds out that they're also just real breasts that she really grew or had breast surgery for. They don't clarify what the situation was there. I believe that she's probably just on HRT. That can happen. And at this point, the question becomes, was this the master plan? Like, even if it turned out she didn't have those, does any of that prove Ace Ventura right? Or does it just look like sexual harassment and assault of an officer from a deranged man?
to get rid of big ol' Mr. Kanish!
This shit isn't foolproof, it's full. And in a moment of desperation at the shit going poorly, Ace takes it all the way and rips off her skirt, revealing her pants. Because, I mean, come on, you know at this point where this is going. But yet, no dick bulge. None of that. This is a shock. But oh wait, Dan alerts us to the fact that she is just tucking as Ace spins her around and we see all of the stuff at the back while Ventura gloriously proclaims that she is not a woman, that she killed Mr. Pedacta because he tried to sleep with her and found out she was really a guy, that all of this adds up, which I don't know if it does. And also, just to brief mention on the tucking part, this is giving you the wrong impression of, I think, how tucking works. I've seen big dick drag queens that can tuck better than this, and I would think that Lois Einhorn, a person pretending to be a woman for, a long period of time, would also be able to do better too. So, I guess Ace Ventura's inability to accurately reflect queerness is not a shocker to anybody. But to this revelation, everyone in the shed begins spitting and trying to rub out their mouth.
He found Captain Winky!
Well, all the guys do anyway. Ace's love interest, whose name I didn't bother learning at any point, but it but it's Courtney Cox, it's Monica from Friends. She doesn't really seem fazed by the whole situation at all. Because as we'll get into later, the whole point of this scene is to make it clear the disgust that goes along with attraction towards trans bodies. The fear in the minds of those who might be into a trans woman or a trans person, only to find out that they were previously a guy or pretending to be a guy, or might have parts that make somebody question their sexuality in a way that is terrifying for men to comprehend. A mindset that is toxic and dangerous for the trans women involved, and often leads to retribution from those guys. Which the film kind of gives us by having Einhorn publicly embarrassed, assaulted, harassed, and sexually demeaned as a person.
Would a real woman be missing these?
If you want more stuff about that, look up the trans panic defense. It won't make you a happier person, but it's important to know about. Her status as a murderer and a kidnapper is almost secondary in regards to why people are reacting with disgust. The guy pretending to be a girl is the far more reviled concept in this scene. And then Ace makes out with Courtney Cox's character. Presumably Einhorn goes to jail, though I honestly have no idea what the case would look like in the courtroom because the evidence seems a little bit flimsy here that she is definitely Ray Finkel. I don't know, is someone gonna have to track down like her surgeons or some shit? But also, in this end scene where Ace is making out with Courtney Cox, what if Courtney Cox's character is trans? Ace? What if she has a penis? Did you rip off her pants to check? How can you be sure unless you violate somebody else's space and body to make sure? And that's the movie. Now, we've got a lot to talk about. A lot. And I want to start us off with the defenses that people will use for the movie and its transphobia. Because right now, things certainly don't look very good. You can sort of see why it's become such an infamously well-known film amongst queer circles. And it's not because Ace Ventura is secretly a cool ally. There is really only one defense that I have seen being commonly used, and it's kind of a combination of arguments, which is basically centered around the notion that Einhorn isn't really trans. She's just a murderous man who happens to be a woman to such a degree that's basically unnoticeable, and who makes out with a bunch of guys when they have no reason because I guess they want to. Ray was gay or some shit. That part never really gets touched upon by the people making this argument, honestly. Now, the problem that I have with this argument is that it doesn't really matter to seeing this as a blatantly transphobic piece of media that uses harmful stereotypes and notions to construct its villain in a way that impacts the trans community and influences people into seeing all trans people as deceivers and disgusting. Whether they are or are not trans is basically irrelevant in the conversation here, because ultimately the audience is getting that message from it about the way that guys should feel around the idea of a woman who used to be a man. And it also encourages the consideration of that group as potentially having people in it that are serial killers or murderers or criminals who are using transness as a shield from justice. That's the exact kind of rhetoric that has fueled a long-standing campaign by conservative lawmakers and pundits to retract rights from the trans community and fuel hate-filled takes that lead to violent assaults and terrorist attacks on us and cis women who just don't match the opinion that those people have of what cis women should look like. It's this kind of comedy, these kinds of jokes, that reflects and reiterates the stances that get trans people killed or harassed. And so effort needs to be done to push back upon the foundation that movies like Ace Ventura helped to reinforce. And to the other defenses that I don't want to waste a lot of time on, the defenses of, well, it's just comedy, can't you take a joke? Or, well, it was so long ago, why are you trying to cancel it? 1. Comedy can still have a real-world impact and can be used to influence how people think or feel. And 2, I'm not trying to cancel it, but we can clearly see the literal effects that movies like Ace Ventura had on other franchises that then had effects on real-world people and their perceptions of real-world trans people. None of this shit exists in a bubble. And so considering it is absolutely something that I think is still very valuable to do, and that you shouldn't dismiss. So that's my argument against the defences that people might put out. But now we gotta say a little bit on the transphobia present here. Like we've already covered, what this really is a display of the concepts around trans women that have really become foundational to much transphobia that the community faces. The vivid reactions to trans bodies from people who are clearly only considering them in regards to their ability to match a conventional form of living, the aggressive invasion of a trans person's body with no real provocation. Seriously, the entire premise of Ace's case is based around ripping off as many clothings as possible from Einhorn to prove that she is trans. And that in some way proves his case when there exist many trans women? As I said, Einhorn could have just been a different trans woman who wasn't Ray Finkel. The transformation of a trans person into a stereotype of a twisted pervert who is overtly sexual and whose mockery is essential to the latter half of the comedy is also a big feature here. Ultimately, you can really see why Ace Ventura became such a well-known transphobic piece, because it contains all the elements that we would come to see over and over again in its offspring. The transphobic jokes that get used throughout shows like How I Met Your Mother, IT Crowd, Simpsons, Family Guy, South Park, and many others. All of which did it afterwards, and almost seemed to be taking notes from Ace Ventura. While there are certainly movies like Boys Don't Cry or The Crying Game which are more visually aggressive in the violation of trans bodies, although not much more than the scene of Ace Ventura tearing off Einhorn's clothing, Ace Ventura had the advantage for being worse of being more appealing to a younger audience, having a PG-13 rating and being designed for teenagers who like Jim Carrey's style of humour, as well as having no real attempt to show some sympathy towards the trans individual. Family Guy, the show that showed the most influence from the movie, at least attempted to make Quagmire's parent be sympathetic, to give Ida some narrative that lets us connect with her and see things from her side. Ace Ventura doesn't even bother doing that, because the trans character is one we are not meant to feel any kind of empathy towards at all. So that's the Ace Ventura video. And I think I can more safely declare this as truly one of the worst moments in all of trans media history. It's iconic almost in the transphobia it represents. And I think because of that, it should be almost an essential criticism for thinking about what we need to change in trans media. This is the very thing we are fighting to counteract, that we're trying to teach people to not do. And sometimes a piece can be instrumental in its failures as much as another succeeds by demonstrating success. At its core, this is the essence of trans misogyny, toxic homophobic masculinity, and systemic bigotry. Yep, successfully managed to tick off all the boxes and justify my 3 years of sociology and media studies degree. Thank God that wasn't a wasted time, huh? Lets me use buzzwords like that to say. Yes, it's that time again. That time when we find another American animated sitcom centered around exploring the life of an American through the lens of a fictional family who have one overall unique trait to sort of lure you in at the start. In King of the Hill's case, the show that we're doing today, the unique element of it is the approach to the characters, which is done in a different way to other animated sitcoms of the same time period, that late 90s to just about 2010, by having them be real and sympathetic and honest in their connection to a grounded presentation of the world. Unlike other shows that go more and more fantastical with what they are doing, King of the Hill sticks with a focus on everyday life, through the visual of blue-collar workers in Texas, a group of people who very frequently get lumped together by the coastal elites that produce these shows into a stereotype of bigots and stupid hick southerners. And King of the Hill does something with its long-term run that really counteracts that particularly annoying representation. An annoying representation to me because I come from a part of the UK that faces the very same thing from the southern London twats, Yorkshire. Because King of the Hill presents its main characters as being receptive to change and to others. It shows them as being able to understand that people are people, and to not be immediately hostile or violent or aggressive towards others with no provocation. I think you can kind of see in King of the Hill the sort of different approach to these family-centric animated sitcoms that would serve to inspire a show like Bob's Burgers down the line, rather than the other side that went more and more extreme in its absurdity on the Family Guy, South Park, American Dad, Rick and Morty side of the family. All from the same dynastic group, but representing very different approaches to the genre. But look, we wouldn't be here talking today if there was not a trans episode or queer episode or trans enough that I can call it that without pissing off most people episode of this show to dig my teeth into. And there is one in King of the Hill's entire run, a little season 11 episode 1 entry named The Peggy Horror Picture Show, which is obviously a reference to that classic of queer cinema, the Rocky Horror Picture Show, which, if you have the time to, you should absolutely watch. The songs are stellar, the themes are confusingly gay, and the acting is wonderful, especially from Tim Curry as Dr. Frankenfurter himself.
We don't want to be any worry.
Well, you got caught with a flat world. How about that?
And I think it's a good reference to use for the episode, because, as we will discuss in further depth when we are done analysing it, the episode and musical both feature characters and themes that are not definitively trans, but also kind of are, or at least could be easily interpreted as such. And ooh, that's the little dangling of some spoilers there for you, to make you want to watch the video to the end so you can find out what the fuck I'm talking about. Who says I'm not a real YouTuber? Anyway, let's get into it. So the two key characters you need to understand for this episode and its trans side of things are those of Hank, the patriarch and everyman of the family, whose worldly approach is a rather guiding light for the audience, and Peggy, the matriarch of the family and teacher, who deals with a series of issues surrounding her femininity due to not matching an explicit gendered stereotype that many other women feel that they should live up to.
You don't even need me to make Spot Peggy?
Nope, I guess not. But that's okay. I didn't marry you because I need someone to cook and clean for me. I married you because, you know, the love.
Those are our main connections to the narrative of this one, and the lens by which we, the audience, are going to find our own interpretation on the trans/queerness influenced. The episode begins with Peggy having a clothing swap event with her gal pals, as recommended by some sort of girls' fashion magazine. An event that turns into a disaster for her quickly as she discovers that her fashion sense is more masculine than the others, her feet are too big for the dainty little shoes, and she is capable of opening a jar of olives. All of this is stuff that clearly upsets the character, probably due to that whole centuries of telling women to match up to a specific ideal or fail that was encouraged by systems and advertising companies and religious organizations and politicians and men and just other women and honestly just about fucking everybody, because it was pervasive from the top to the bottom of how we ran things, and still kind of do a little bit.
Oh, shucks. Surely someone will want these overalls.
That is a hard thing to move past as a singular individual, and does require a strength of character and will in a superhuman amount to not let such a thing get you down. This carries into our next scene, where Peggy seeks reassurance from Hank about her femininity, which Hank does offer her in a direct contrast to what you might come to have expected from animated sitcom family dads, but remember, they can be good husbands and guys.
I just felt so ungainly compared to those women.
Why don't you call your shoe store in Lubbock? I'm treating you to some new shoes.
Thank you, Hank.
Which is a persistent message of King of the Hill. The joke carryover here between scenes is that Hank offers to let Peggy treat herself at Lubbock's very big shoes, so that she can get some more feminine boots that fit and reassure her connection to femininity. But unfortunately, the business has gone out of business, and Peggy then has to go hunting for a new shoe place in Texas for her needs, while also dealing with some rather unnecessary sassing from her niece, Louis-Anne.
A bracelet. It's what some women wear on their wrists. It's like jewelry.
Yes, Luann, I know what a bracelet is.
Peggy then finds this store, Clarissa's Closet, which has all the variety of shoes in the size 16 that she needs. For the queer people in the audience who are seeing the name of this place and going, well, there's an obvious warning sign of where this is going. Yeah, I know, it's pretty blatant to us, but it might be not so obvious to people like Peggy, you know, cis straight people who've never had to engage with that kind of culture, you know. Clarissa's Closet just seems like a weird name, I guess, not an obvious sign. Now, we obviously here have the continued idea that Peggy is embarrassed by her feet size, and finds it uncomfortable what such a thing indicates about her to others, who may take that as a way to mock someone.
Hello, do you have a pump in a size 16?
Which brand?
I mean, a common way that people attack women is by evoking masculinity in them. Oh, you have body hair like a man, or you're built like a man, or you look like a dude. All common assaults on femininity that cis women have dealt with for decades and decades, anytime they do anything that goes against those patriarchal perceptions. And out of my own sense of curiosity, I looked up how big a size 16 shoe is because, well, I wondered if it was even that big at all, and I discovered a few things. Firstly, for no reason at all that I can work out, New Zealand's shoe sizes have New Zealand women's shoe size be the same as US women's shoe size, while New Zealand men's shoe size is the same as UK men's shoe size, which is 0.5 less than US men's shoe size for the same length. Explain that one to me, shoemakers. Regardless, a size 16 women's is quite big feet for, honestly, anyone, as that would be about 31 centimeters long. So the episode is correct, those are big feet that general stores are just not going to carry for certain styles because of sexism. That's legitimately all it is. I mean, men can have small feet and women can have big feet. There is no definitive size range, though there are more common variants, obviously. As we will get into, this ties into the whole transgender thing, because one could see this as an area that Peggy deals with something that certain trans women also have to deal with, and have it impact their own femininity in a very similar manner. There is a shared struggle there, though yet again not an inherent one, because not all men or people born with specific chromosomes or whatever have big feet. I have size 9 women's feet, which is about average for a woman. Human biology is a wonderful and varied thing to marvel at, as long as people are not dickheads with it and abuse it to attack others. To get us back on topic and back on episode, Peggy meets another woman at the shoe store while trying shoes on. A lady named Carolyn, who bonds with her over the, well, shoes.
That is how I feel about these shoes.
Oh, here, you take it.
Oh, thank you. Peggy?
Carolyn.
I usually hear this, not say it. Nice grip.
It's a shoe store, you know, that one should have been obvious. But also by some kind of connection of how they break certain conventions. Peggy then dumps on Hank all of the great things she learned from Carolyn during their time hanging out, and how much of a connection they formed so quickly around a camaraderie that Peggy doesn't often have with other women.
I felt this instant sense of camaraderie with her that I don't normally find with other women.
So you've got someone to talk to about this stuff now. That's great.
Yes, it is, Hank.
Now, you can sort of see the possible really terrible comedy premise and outcome outline lurking on the horizon here. The dark cloud of transphobia that is sweeping towards us based around some sort of discovery that Carolyn isn't really a woman. And that will both be used for laughter at the expense of not just Carolyn but also Peggy. And that truly horrific outcome is something that I think I have grown to expect just because the bar we have for trans representation is so low that I naturally incline towards us being used for mockery or gross factor or bits about our bodies/lives that are targeted at us. Ultimately, it's a knee-jerk reaction from years of media confirming that belief about it, but I am going to suppress my fears and my bias here and hope for positivity, because this is King of the Hill after all. This show is notoriously kinder and more inclusive just naturally by the characters being good people and them being good people being part of the, satire. Our next scene at a restaurant continues to reaffirm the encouragement of Peggy, as Carolyn expresses a desire to want to know more about how she so easily eats food without ruining her makeup. Something that Peggy reacts to in a way that indicates that self-doubt around her womanhood.
Peggy, you ate that whole sandwich.
Yes. Yes, I did. Ugh, I'm sorry. That was very unladylike.
And none of your lipstick smeared or came off at all. How do you do that?
This continues as they drive in the car, and Peggy offers more tips that she has learned for maintaining the image that she does to the confirmation of Carolyn. What we're seeing here is something that Peggy and a lot of other women struggle to find, which is people who affirm them for what they are and what they do without using it as an impingement or judgment upon them. It's a really nice bonding experience to watch, and I just hope that nothing goes fucky with it. Fingers really crossed here. Which does bring us to our next scene, where Carolyn goes home and her mum welcomes her back and compliments her on her wig and calls her son, and oh, shock, horror, Carolyn is actually a guy. Guy who merely wears a woman's outfit when they are out and about, like almost all the time.
I love the new wig, son. Gorgeous.
Thanks. I just had the best time with this new girl, Peggy Hill. I don't know what his real name is.
I also want to briefly mention the cool line that Karen's mother drops of "do not apologize for yourself now or ever," which combined with her general acceptance of whatever her child is getting up to does present a really comforting visage of supportive parenting.
Hey Mom, sorry I'm late.
Do not apologize for yourself now or ever.
But we also discover that Carolyn clearly thinks that Peggy is also a drag queen, or a trans woman, or whatever Carolyn must be herself, and therefore is thinking that Peggy also is. We see now the seeds for drama being set, I think. It's pretty obvious the arc that it's going to follow, and it's just a matter of seeing how long it takes to get there. Peggy and Carolyn go to the mall, and Carolyn drops a line about how most of her friends are afraid to go shopping in public, instead ordering most of their clothes online.
Some of my friends are too scared to go to the mall. They buy everything online.
Which to the cis people might not seem like anything, but to all those queers out there, in whatever form their gender expression might be going, that is one hell of a getting called out by this show. I know plenty of queer people that will buy their clothes online because it's less judgment and people can't see them buying it and form opinions about that or harass them, you know, so ouch. Carolyn and Peggy then both get involved in planning for Carolyn's performance show, which is, I mean, it's clearly a drag show to everyone but Peggy, I guess.
Now don't be afraid to move your head a little during the humming part, so people will know you're pretending to hum.
And And Carolyn also finally gets introduced to Peggy's family, with Hank being just happy that his wife has found a friend that she's really enjoying being around, and Bobby being way too invested in his own plotline of figuring out this darn joke book.
Bobby, this is my new friend, Carolyn. Carolyn, my son Bobby. Hey.
Carolyn suddenly starts clicking that something is up when she asks about whether Peggy adopted. Because remember, she thinks that Peggy is in a similar situation to her, kind of. Look, I want to touch briefly upon this right now and explore it much further after we're done going over the episode. But what is happening here in the Peggy Horror Picture Show is a similar thing that happens a lot in these older pieces of television and movie, which is a series of interpretations of drag and trans and queerness that are not necessarily clear in what exactly the people involved are supposed to be. Partly inspired by cis people not being fully immersed in that culture, and also partly inspired by the fact that a lot of people themselves didn't really know how to connect with their own gender in ways that we've become more accustomed to with time. What I'm saying here is that plenty of drag queens back in the day were trans women who didn't figure out any way to explore their femininity and be themselves except by being drag queens and using that more already established identity. As we can clearly see a lot in this episode, how Carolyn exists almost entirely as a woman without a purpose, and is seen and connected as such by most people, in a way that not all drag queens do that, where there is a distinction between the persona they employ on stage versus the person they are aside from them. What I'm saying is that trans identity has never been a clear, straight pathway from point A to point B, where everybody shares the same story and transition and way of expressing that. And for cis people to look at characters and go, well, they're a drag queen and they exist with other drag queens in a drag queen community, that ain't transgenderism, really ignores the complexity of those identities and the fact that drag queens can also be trans women too. Yes, my hair is pissing me off. Back to the scene. This discovery seems to shake Carolyn a bit, and she clearly did not expect to find out she was talking to a cis straight woman.
I imagine this is what it looks like when you're stabbed in the stomach at several different angles, huh?
Yeah, stabbing. Could I have another drink, please?
Which she then takes back to her mother and reveals how such a thing is, I guess, a big deal for Carolyn. Carolyn's mother then drops another bombshell take by saying this.
Mom, she's a real woman, and...
You mean a biological woman. Just because you were born a male doesn't make you any less of a woman. Let no one clip your wings, babe.
I love this woman. This is the best parent we have ever had on any episode ever in regards to the genderqueer kid. I'm using genderqueer there because clearly there is some stuff happening with Carolyn that ain't cis, but it's not definitively transgender as we would know it. Carolyn's mother's quotes are giving me life right now. And I do also think it's very funny how Carolyn has to be like, please stop being so supportive, I'm trying to explain a problem to you here. Like, that's a very real situation for a lot of queer kids with their supportive parents of being like, I get it, you're being supportive, I love that, but also please, for a second, just listen to me.
Could you stop being supportive for 1 second and listen? I've got a problem. I can't let a real woman perform with me. It's a drag show.
And we then discover from that that the
Did not mean to get rid of that. How does it feel?